So Tocqueville then is kind of disappointed in what he's found. Uh, so now let's have a look at Max Weber, because obviously he's got perhaps a bigger canvas to work on. But he looked at China as well as looked at Europe and America and all these places. And what would he be looking at in particular now and finding either exciting or strange or not quite what he'd expect? What bits and pieces would he see that he would expect and say, "Yep, told you that was going to happen"?
Well, he's a sort of prophet,
Mm.
but his greatest prophecy, one of his greatest prophecies, has turned out to be wrong, which is the prophecy about the death of religion,
Yeah.
because he thought that rationality and the scientific spirit and modernity would gradually get rid of this whole magical view of life. And certainly it would do so in the West. I'm not sure he thought it would do so in China, but it would do so in America and Europe, that we would become more enlightened. As we've discussed before, there was a sadness in this too, because you lose the meaning of life, as Ernest would say, as you lose the magic and the religion. But it's inevitable. So secularization, as they call it, was one of his prophecies, and it's turned out to be wrong with, in the case of America, particularly. But the bit that interests me most, I think, is in relation to China. His book on China, which, as I've said, I think is brilliant. It's ambivalent about the future of China. He has no real idea. He may have been in the school of Karl Marx and other thinkers in the 19th century, which is that China is such a vast, immobile and stationary world. It was the point of view that was beginning with Montesquieu and onwards, that China is unchanging. And remember, he's writing in around 1900, that sort of time. And it's still the Qing Empire. And China is repeating itself and falling to pieces and going up. So he described it as basically it has been for 2,500 or 10,000 or whatever number of thousands of years you want, an imperial Confucian, Taoist, Buddhist world, a magic garden, a world where you haven't separated, you haven't become modern. So China, for him, is a pre-modern, non-modern. It's not even pre-modern because it's outside. It's, if he were Marx, he would say, Marx excluded it by making it part of the Asiatic mode of production, which will never become communist or capitalist or anything, because it's an iceberg. It's never going to thaw. And Weber describes it like that, as everlasting and enduring. And this is why people like Jack Goody, who attack him, say, he got it wrong about China. He said it wouldn't ever become modern, and look at it now. Now, if Max Weber went to China 2021, he would be amazed. And the first thing he would do is to question whether he got it completely wrong. Because when you go to China, as I hope viewers of this little session will do, if you're fortunate, because many people, well, a few people find it disturbing, very disturbing, but if you're fortunate like me, you are just taken aback by seeming to tread certainly in places like Shenzhen and Shanghai, and even in parts of the countryside, with the future. You seem to be like Tocqueville going to America. You seem to suddenly move from 19th century to the 21st century, because the technologies are way ahead. Not just the bullet trains and things like that, but the payment systems and the smartphones, and life is what we imagine it will be like here if we hadn't abandoned Huawei in 5G. I mean, it's 10, 20 years on, and people are living lives, the educational system, parts of the health system, many parts of life are teaching us lessons. The supercomputers are far faster than our supercomputers. There's no way you could have predicted even 30, 40 years ago when Deng Xiaoping came in that they would be materially and in many ways socially. Many young Chinese have very fulfilled lives of lots of games and sports and so on and so on. They read a lot. The music and the culture has developed hugely in the last few years. So China is, for many people, a much nicer place to live in if you are not wanting to question too much or to strike out in new directions, and you may get into trouble. But for many people, the standard of living and quality of living is so good that if you go to the West, you are often disappointed. Now, he could say, well, I was completely wrong because I thought their technologies, which are an epiphenomena of their social systems and politics, couldn't change. And here it is. I think if he spent more time there and being Weber, although he wasn't an anthropologist, the interesting thing is he did all his main work from books and reading about these places. He would have said, well, perhaps I'm not so wrong after all. And this is a theme of my work, so I may be projecting him. He said, well, actually, this is the surface of China. And that the surface of China and the technologies and the science, and we've discussed this before, are very innovative and flowing very fast. Their legal systems are adapting well, their educational systems, their health systems. They are in many ways becoming modern if you judge modernity in terms of these outward things. If you judge modernity in terms of the way my friend Alan Macfarlane, because I'd like to be a friend of Weber, defines it, which is the separation of spheres, separation of politics from economics, separation of politics from ideology and from society. China is not modern. It hasn't separated out politics from the other parts of life. Politics is what holds China together, and ideology is subject to it, and everything is within a political frame, as it has been, because that's the only way China has been held together for thousands of years. And also, it hasn't abandoned its pluralistic world vision. In other words, it hasn't become monotheistic and like Greek or Western thought. It is still a world of contending ideologies. And therefore, in many ways, by my definition in my book, it's still a magic garden, because at any moment in China, you can just drop through the floor as you can in China and be in a Buddhist shrine or a Taoist temple or Confucian temple, and you are in something very old and different. And you can be talking to, very well-educated, westernized Chinese, and suddenly they will show that they believe in all this ancestor worship and ghosts and the rest of it. So China is both very, very ultra-modern on the surface, but very China below, and it's managed to preserve these things. So its point of departure 2,000 years ago with the first Qin emperor is still there, and it's still an imperial country. So my picture of it, if you add tall buildings and bullet trains and supercomputers to what I've described in my book, that's China still.